Ugh, we all know that feeling. It is so uncomfortable. And if you haven't experienced it yet, it's gonna happen at some point in your freelancing career. And that is when a client ghosts you. So it's not fun. It is not a good feeling, but it is something that is going to happen at some point in time, unfortunately. And I kind of feel like ghosting in general is something that's kind of grown culturally, not just with clients. So it's definitely a thing though, and it never feels good. So I want to give you a few tips, tricks, tools, and even just a way of thinking about it so that it has less of an impact on your emotional well-being. Because like I said, it's kind of an impactful thing and it really, really doesn't feel good. By the way, I'm Sarah Turner. I'm a freelance medical copywriter and copywriting mentor, and I have helped over 4,000 students break into freelance copywriting. And today I want to chat with you some of the best things that you can put in place to eliminate and also feel better about when a client ghosts you, because some of these things are emotional techniques. So the first things first is I want you to consider, is it really ghosting? And that might feel a little silly, but it's something that I see newbies kind of freak out about when they're first starting out. Let's say because they don't hear back from a client in 48 hours, maybe it's over a holiday or over the weekend. Keep in mind that different clients are going to have different response times that are typical. And eventually, the longer you've worked with a client, you will start to know what those timelines tend to be. I have some clients that respond instantly. I have some clients that won't respond for like a week, and that's just their standard. So before you jump to any conclusions, I want you to make sure that you're actually really being ghosted and not just kind of looking out for being ghosted. Because if you've been ghosted once, it's really easy to start to filter your interactions through that lens and to feel like you're being ghosted when in fact maybe something came up and maybe it's just nothing at all. So that's the first place that we got to start, is kind of pushing back on any assumptions and noticing if you tend to make those assumptions early on. Because when you can push back on assumptions like that, it can really decrease the amount of internal drama that you feel as you're navigating running a freelance writing business. And that is super important to your overall mental well-being. I know this from experience. The next piece is another mindset technique, and that is to remember that it really is unlikely that it's about you. Seriously, I have had clients ghost me and then came to find out that something happened in their personal life that was extremely upsetting. They had a family emergency, something really wrong happened, and they were upset and unable to deal with what was in front of them. So try really hard to give people the benefit of the doubt, because more often than not, it's not about you, it's about something that's going on in their life. Now, if you're first starting out and this is happening consistently, it is worth looking into at what point in your process is this happening. Is it when you send a proposal? Is it when you hop on a call with them? Is it right after you hop on a call with them? Is it when payment is coming? Because if there's a pattern in when it's happening, then it might be worth looking at that particular part in your process. I'll give you an example. I had a student who was getting ghosted every time she sent a proposal. And by every time, I mean 3 times. That's another thing newbies do, is they see something happen 3 times and they think, oh my gosh, this is how my life is going to be forever. I get it. I was once there. It was only 3 times. However, 3 times is enough to make you go, what's going on here? So we took a look at her proposals and we came to the conclusion that they were far too complicated. She was giving them 3 different options to choose from every time, and each option was extremely lengthy in its description. And at the end of the day, clients are really looking to you to kind of make that recommendation. So it was overwhelming them. I asked her to try and really hone in on one recommendation, the best potential recommendation for them and their business, and to really simplify the verbiage around it. And lo and behold, she hasn't been ghosted since. So use ghosting as a chance to look for clues. But again, more often than not, it's usually not something that has to do with you, especially if there isn't a pattern of it. Another thing I want to encourage you, especially if you're a newbie freelance copywriter, is if a client is ghosting you, don't wait around on them. If you are constantly, especially when you're trying to gain new clients and really grow your business, focusing on client acquisition, one person ghosting you is not something that's going to stick around in your memory if you're constantly moving forward. That's why I always encourage people when they're doing the client acquisition part of their business and they're really trying to grow and ramp up to focus on that, right? So you don't need to be sitting around, tapping your foot, waiting for them to respond to your proposal. Nope. Don't do that. Instead, focus forward and keep hitting the pavement and reaching out and growing the pipeline of potential clients. And that's another way to kind of distract you a little bit in the early beginnings. Now, if you're being ghosted by a client that you've already got some work underway, that's kind of the worst kind of ghosting. And it can feel really awful. But let this be an opportunity to put some policies in place. I like to joke that these clients are policies in the making because they're the ones that you learn from, you implement policies, and you'll have the conviction to keep those policies and boundaries in place for future clients. That's actually a really important process to go through as a freelancer. So when people are first starting out, I like to encourage them to charge 50% upfront and 50% upon first draft completion. That means you're going to withhold edits until it's paid in full. And that kind of gives you both a little bit of skin in the game. But if you are doing client acquisition strategies like cold outreach, cold email, DMing, it's a little weird sometimes to ask for 100% of the payment of your project in full upfront. So the 50-50 rule works really well for newbies who are really doing a lot of client outreach. Eventually, you're going to move to a point in your career where you're going to collect payment up front. And I always collect payment up front. It's very common in the industry, so eventually feel good moving in that direction. And when you're working with clients, after a few months are under your belt and you guys have a nice, healthy working relationship, offer to move over to this model. And again, remind them that it's common, remind them that it's easier on them because they don't have multiple invoices that they have to pay at the end of each month. And honestly, I've never had a client push back on this. They're usually relieved to kind of move over to that system. The other thing I want to encourage you to do when it comes to addressing somebody who's ghosting you is to always use a considerate tone when you're following up with them. Please give them the benefit of the doubt. I cannot tell you the number of times I've been frustrated with a client, thought I was being ghosted, and then came to find out they were actually going through a divorce or something had happened with their child. Keep in mind that you have no idea what is going on in their world. And so when you give them the benefit of the doubt, not only are you keeping an open line of communication and you're more likely to hear from them, but also you're usually less likely to kind of torment yourself with all the different what ifs. So be considerate, and also it's a good idea to just kind of maintain decent relationships, even if ultimately you decide that you're not going to want to work with this client again. The other thing I want to remind you when you're dealing with a client who's potentially ghosting you is to keep communication super simple. Sometimes if we write emails that are super lengthy, people open them up, their eyes gloss over, and they're less likely to respond. So one sentence emails checking in, hey, what's going on here? And if you have another way to reach them besides email, and it gets to that point where you really need to reach them, again, maybe you're waiting on a payment, this would probably be the only time I would do this, is you can also reach out to them in other forms of communication. Maybe you have them on Voxer, maybe you have them on Facebook, whatever. But if it's in these stages where you haven't actually started working together and it's not a paid client copywriter relationship, then you know what? Email once, twice, maybe 3 times, and then kind of let it go. And then finally, I want to remind you that you are in charge. So if you have a client who is ghosting you pretty regularly or not responding or not paying you, it is time to find new clients, because that is not a good foundation for a long-term working relationship. I'll go ahead and wrap up with one of my most frustrating situations because, again, I want you to know that even successful copywriters experience getting ghosted, and it is very, very frustrating. So one time I had a client that I had been working with for many months on projects. He decided he wanted to go an entirely different direction with his business, and I think it was just a lot to kind of communicate because he was working on the actual day-to-day. And so he ended up not paying me a final invoice. I reached out to him 15 days, 3 weeks, a month, probably many times after that. And at one point, I think I had reached out to him about 5 times and he hadn't responded to me. And he had owed me the 50% final portion of a project that we had worked on together. And I was super confused because we had many months of a working relationship that was going what I thought very, very well. And so I ultimately CC'd his wife on an email because they were in business together, and I also had her email, and I just said, hey, I don't know what's going on, but this invoice is still outstanding, and, just wanted to get your attention on this. Is there anything I can do? Giving them the benefit of the doubt. I'm not entirely sure why I haven't heard from you, but please let me know if there's some clarification or anything else you need on my end to finally close out this project. And the wife responded and was like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. Here's what's been going on these last few months. And I was like, oh, okay. I decided to not continue working with them. They actually wanted to continue working once things settled and they were able to kind of refocus on their marketing. But by that point in time, I was like, that was enough of a situation for that to not be okay with me. And that's okay. So keep in mind, the main points here are try not to make any assumptions, try to keep moving forward, and if they owe you money, CC their wife. All right, I hope that helps. Go ahead and hit that thumbs up button, and please don't forget to subscribe. It means so much to me, and of course, I love hearing from you guys in the comments and suggestions for future videos. I would love to hear from you. That's where I get a lot of these ideas, is straight from you guys. So thanks for showing up. Thanks for answering that. And thanks for being here.